its value has not diminished, even if its price has gone down, right? So, should I sell? Well, let me see. Is the Fed still printing money like crazy? Yes.
Yep.
No. Okay. Are prices running rampant? Yes. Okay. Um, are the world's supply logistics kind of screwed up, and does it seem like it's going to be a challenging next few months? Yes. Okay. Are governments flexing their dictatorial muscles? Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't sell Bitcoin.
All right, the Bitcoin coach, welcome to the Renegade. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could just give an introduction about yourself and what you do in the Bitcoin space, that would be great.
Sure. I've been an investor and entrepreneur and consultant for years. And I jumped into Bitcoin mid 2017. And some of the other projects I was involved in sort of wound down with was figuring out what to do. I realized that people needed help getting into Bitcoin. It's not just a matter of, telling them to buy Bitcoin. That's really not enough. They need some guidance down the rabbit hole. So I decided to start helping people do that. So ever since, say, summer of last year, I've been working as a Bitcoin coach and helping the crypto curious understand why and how to invest in Bitcoin.
And you're a toxic maximalist, correct? You're a Bitcoin maximalist?
Yeah, it was interesting this cycle because like I'm in a bunch of chat groups in Telegram, and I've been bugging people about Bitcoin since it was I don't know, 13,000 or something, and so a few were interested and maybe not. But now with alt season, people just out of the wood, everybody was into shitcoins, blah blah blah. So I've sort of made my peace that people are going to gamble, and the only thing I try to make really clear to my clients is, look, if you're investing in altcoins, if you like to gamble and it's fun for you, go nuts. Just don't think that don't tell me you're investing in Dogecoin. You're not, and remember to take profits. I had a client send me a screenshot of Ethereum Classic, the chart of it going up. I was like, oh my God, don't buy that. And he's like, right, I already bought it, but I'm going to sell. And he said, I did 600%, I think, in 2 weeks or something ridiculous like that. And the next day, he sends me another chart complaining because it kept going up. And I'm like, was 600% not enough? I mean, was that not a good return? So people, I think one of the problem with us is that like people get sucked into the speculative mania, and they don't really like set targets, and they're not disciplined about their gambling. So
Yeah.
it's a dangerous thing. I stay away from them. I don't follow them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the difference between a Bitcoin maximalist and a, crypto type person is we don't view Bitcoin like it's a gamble.
No.
I look at Bitcoin like it's a very safe asset. I mean, if you're holding it, if you want to sell it within 4 years of buying it, it's probably, that's not a good idea. But long term, it's a very safe asset, I think. And it's the most decentralized out of all of the 9,000 plus cryptocurrencies. It has the largest hash rate. So yeah, moving on to, I mean, there's been a lot of FUD lately on Bitcoin. The price has dipped quite a lot. I don't know what was the lowest price? I saw 35,000.
Oh God, let me see.
Okay.
It was 30,066 on Bitstamp.
Wow. Yeah. So it's dipping quite a lot. Um, what do you, I mean, before we go into the FUD, let me just ask you about this dip right now. What's going on here in your opinion?
Yeah, it's one of the things I've learned through time in this space is that you'll always hear people trying to figure out the narrative of what happened, right? And sometimes there's like something real that happened, right? Like for example, when those there was that accident in the mine in China and all of the hash rate went down. That's something real that happened that triggered the blocks to be slower and the fees to go up. It's important to keep abreast of what's happening. With price action, it's often there was the whole drama with Elon Musk, which was, I think, really unfortunate and very confusing because it really made no sense. There was Tether. They published the report about the reserves, and it turns out that the reserves are not really like being held in reserves; they're kind of being invested, which they really shouldn't be. There was tax season, right? So how all of you, there was a China ban for the nth time. So there are so many things that it's hard to tell what exactly is happening. And of course, I think whales will take any good opportunity to liquidate, to trigger liquidations and whatnots.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
So going into the energy FUD, because that seems to be the biggest factor of this happening right now. You mentioned Elon's tweets didn't make any sense. I totally agree with that. Why is this a bogus claim that is not based on any factual data? Why is Bitcoin, why is it not bad for the environment? And you have Kathy Wood saying that it's actually a net positive for the environment, which is quite fascinating. So what's your opinion on the energy FUD?
And she's not the only one. It's like many things in Bitcoin. It's a nuanced topic, right? And so one of the things I tell my clients is one of the things you need to learn is how to look at and understand Bitcoin, because on the surface level, it'll seem like one thing, but you need to dig deeper often to really understand some of the essentials of it. And the first thing that is not often mentioned is that it's not that Bitcoin needs all this energy, right? Because people are concerned, oh my God, and then if the price keeps going up, it's going to consume more energy, and then we're going to boil the polar bears. No, it doesn't work like that. The energy requirements of Bitcoin and its energy usage are two kind of separate things. Like, let's pretend I tell you I'm going to build a steel vault, right, to store some gold. How thick do the walls need to be? Well,
Probably
maybe
very thick. Yeah.
right. So maybe half an inch is not enough. Maybe you want, 2 inches. All right, fine. Or maybe it's 6 or 12. But once you have 3 feet of steel, and then you take it to 10 feet, does it make a difference if it's 10 feet or 20 feet of steel? It starts to become, I'm not sure how much. So that's sort of what happens. Mining is a way of providing security for Bitcoin. Mining makes Bitcoin secure. So the more miners, the more secure it is. How much security do you need? It's really hard to tell, right? Is 1 foot of steel enough, or do we need 10 feet? But the thing is that it's a market. It's not, there's no Bitcoin dictating, oh, now I need more miners. If people are inclined to mine because it makes sense for them economically, then they'll go into mining. And the market will find its own thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if 50 years from now we look back and say, oh, that was way over secured. It may be the case. We're in the process of finding out. But I think that's that's something important that people often don't realize is it's not that Bitcoin needs this much electricity. It could use half and work fine. It'd be easier to attack it. But where easier means less expensive.
Yeah.
Right? The last number I saw, I think, was like $700,000 per hour to try to attack Bitcoin.
Right. For a 51% attack. Yeah. I think, what is that website called for anybody listening? Is crypto51attack.com, or I think that's the website. Crypto 51 attack. Yeah.
I'm sure if you
Um,
Google, 51%, that you'll find it.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, so moving into that more, Bitcoin has the largest amount of hash rate compared to any other cryptocurrency, which secures the network because of the amount of mining power. But currently, there are a lot of people in society who think that's a really bad thing. And I know Nick Carter put out some really great articles talking about how
Yeah.
it's actually, I mean, it's either the energy is going to be wasted, because to my understanding, he wrote in one of his articles that globally 8% of all energy is lost during transit. And a lot of these sites that produce energy, like hydroelectric power and stuff like that, they're in remote locations of the earth, and they already have an excess amount of energy, so it's just being wasted. And what Bitcoin is doing is it's essentially just monetizing that wasted energy and making sure that we don't produce things that we don't use, really. And I don't see how that's a bad thing. And if you look at lithium battery, like where it's extracted, if you've ever seen like lithium battery environmental impacts, it's pretty insane. Like it
Or yeah.
yeah, go ahead, go
And
ahead.
and same thing for gold, right? The energy requirements to mine gold are not trivial. It's like more than twice that of Bitcoin. And um, you make a good point. Another thing to understand is that mining is a very competitive space, and so miners need the cheapest possible electricity to be competitive. And the one that was going to go to waste, the one that it's like, all right, this I'm going to have to just throw into the garbage, and there's nobody because I can't use it. That's the cheapest. Why does that happen? Because electricity, like you said, is not easy or cheap to transport, and it's not easy or cheap to store. So it needs to be produced on demand, and often those energy production centers have excess capacity, and they're just sort of have some extra that they either waste or they spin down some of their capacity if demand is not there. So Bitcoin can make use of that excess capacity, and this is a process that also doesn't happen overnight, right? For example, we're hearing some excellent examples of miners partnering up with gas extraction companies, right? And so instead of having the gas just be flared out into the atmosphere, they're capturing that gas, cleaning it up, burning it, and for a turbine to produce electricity, and then mining Bitcoin. So what used to be waste now becomes Bitcoin, right? And I think that that's something that is going to only increase. And to your point about, where do you build a hydroelectric dam? Well, wherever the water is. And is a city near that? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? So being able to monetize energy, regardless of whether or not it's close to the population, is something that hasn't happened before. It didn't used to exist. So it's important to understand sort of the long-term incentives that appear once Bitcoin mining is understood.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's never existed. Bitcoin monetizes energy, which is quite an interesting concept to think about. You brought up a good point. I mean, with gold, people don't talk about how destructive the gold industry is for the environment. Or I believe I read an article one time. I can't remember what the name of it was called. Dang it! But talked about the banking system using somewhere around 5 to 10 times the amount of energy that Bitcoin uses. And then what I talked about, because the military, is personal to me. When I used to be in the military, the U.S. military is the world's largest polluter. Like the number one
Yeah.
polluter on planet Earth is the U.S. military, and Bitcoin. I bring this point up all the time. The Iraq War costed $6 trillion. And these wars in the Middle East yet have had over literally a genocide, over 1 million civilians being killed in the Middle East, and all we're doing over there is just destroying the earth, just bombing the hell out of that place. And if we get on a Bitcoin standard, then that will not be possible. And fiat currency is the most destructive thing for the environment because it enables governments to pay for, these crazy imperialistic militaries, which have bombs and tanks and all of these things, which, I don't know about you, but I don't think it's good to just blow up
Yeah, when
planet Earth,
no,
Nobody talks about that.
I absolutely agree. And like when I've discussed this with clients, they don't get the connection right away, right? So it's important to remember that in the past, right, let's say medieval times, if the lord of the realm wanted to go to war with the neighbor, right, he needed to go to his people and rally them and say, oh, we need to go fight these guys and collect taxes to pay the army for that war. So there needed to be some support from the community in order to be able to finance the war. So coming back to your point about why Bitcoin makes war expensive is because the way war is fought today is they don't need to collect taxes to pay for the war machine. They just print the money, right? And since you can't just print Bitcoin out of thin air, that means that any wars under a Bitcoin standard would need the support of the population, blah, 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 and are likely to be less frequent, less and less long, right?
Yeah.
Like if there needs to be a conflict, it'll be concentrated, it'll be quick because they won't be able to afford long drawn out affairs.
Yeah.
And of course, war is phenomenal business for some. So when we see price dips like I'm not surprised. There's some people who are very invested in Bitcoin not succeeding, and they'll do their best to try to scare people away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you know what? For the connection, let's just turn our cameras off because I think that might help. You broke up a couple
Sure.
times, nothing major, but yeah. So, anyways, back to war. You and I are totally on the same page with that. It's interesting because if the media brings it up and you have a billionaire who the only reason he's in business is because the government is giving him, millions and millions
Right.
and millions. I don't know how much money he's got. Do you know how much money Tesla has received from the government? Is it
I
billions or
don't.
millions?
Oh, I'm sure it's not millions. I'm pretty sure it's in the billions range. But I honestly don't know. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Now,
either way, it's just a ton of money, and it's
now bear in mind, he's not just a billionaire who depends on subsidies, but he sells electric cars. So this position of electricity for my cars good, electricity to mine Bitcoin bad is disingenuous and completely nonsensical.
yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. For him not to acknowledge the environmental impacts of what he's doing versus Bitcoin, which is can be it's reasonable to say that Bitcoin is good for the environment. So
And one other thing, like because of one analogy that I often make in my courses, I always ask my clients, what kind of electricity do you use at home, AC or DC? And over 90% of them don't really know, right?
hmm,
So my point is, people objecting to this to Bitcoin's electricity usage, honestly, for the most part, have no idea what they're talking about. Like, how
yeah,
much electricity should Bitcoin use? Uh, more than Netflix, more than Christmas light? What would seem appropriate to you? More than Amazon? Less than Google? I mean, who's why are we not questioning other industries that are electricity intensive?
yeah,
Right?
that's a very good point, and it's a hell of a lot more important than Netflix. That's for sure. Like a global sound money, that's a lot more important than a stupid show on Netflix. But so let's move on to the Tether FUD, because that's another one. I mean, you mentioned earlier that Tether posted their reserves, which was pretty interesting. So maybe you can just kind of elaborate on your views on that. And yeah.
Sure. And first, just let me use Tether to illustrate the part of the nature of Bitcoin FUD in general, right? So one of one of the conversations I always have with my clients is the risks of Bitcoin. And when I first made the slideshow for that conversation, I didn't have Tether in it. And then as Bitcoin started to rise, it was still below 20,000, but as Bitcoin started to rise, Tether FUD appeared, out of the woodwork, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, it's all Tether. Tether's pumping the price, blah blah blah. So I needed to include a few more slides explaining the Tether situation, right? For those who don't know, Tether is a stable coin, which means it tries to keep an even parity with fiat. One Tether equals $1. And so Tether's claim was that for every Tether we issue, we have $1 in the bank. Okay, so far so good. And people would see, because it's on a blockchain, people could see Tether just printed, I don't know, $1 billion. And then the next day Bitcoin would go up, and you'll see it was Tether. It's pumping up the price. Which is kind of like watching people open their umbrellas and then, seeing the rain and saying, oh, the people with umbrellas are making it rain, right? Correlation is not causation. So if Tether is printing Tether, it's because people are buying Tether in order to buy either Bitcoin or some other crypto, right?
Can I chime in there real quick?
Yeah.
Can you explain more on that? Because I think that's a really important point. You're saying people use Tether to buy Bitcoin. I mean, because the traditional FUD is, okay, well, Tether is just being created out of thin air, and some nefarious entities are just buying a bunch of Bitcoin with it and inflating the price, and Bitcoin's artificially high. So yeah, I mean, could you elaborate on that a little more as far as why somebody would want to use Tether in order to buy Bitcoin?
Sure. And let me start by saying I'm not a fan of Tether. I'm not a user of Tether, and I don't recommend Tether, right? But I'll qualify what I said earlier. It's not so much that people, as in normal people, use Tether to buy frequently, but large traders will often use it. And there's some legitimate reasons to use a stable coin like Tether, because traditional payment rails are slow. Like if you want to send a wire to an exchange, it can take days, right? And Tether moves at the speed of crypto, which means within a few hours at the most, you'll have your money in the exchange. And the other reason is that it allows exchanges that don't meet all the requirements to accept US dollars to accept a virtual type of US dollar in the form of Tether, right? So they don't need to comply with all the know your customer and anti-money laundering rules. And still Tether is sort of a way for them to capture some inflow of dollars. And also for people, let's say, if you're a trader and you bought some Bitcoin and you took some profit, you don't necessarily want to send that profit back to your checking account. Maybe you want to keep it parked in the exchange while you're waiting for your next entry point. So the idea of a stable coin or a crypto stable coin, I think, makes sense and is overall a value add to the space, right? I'm not against stable coins at all, I think. And by the way, neither is the U.S. government. They have now approved banks to interact with stable coins, and I think it's a smart move. Now, the problem with this particular one with Tether is, first of all, you mentioned shady, and I say, yeah, I think there's a lot of shadiness. Part of it, I could try to say, you know what, but also keep in mind that crypto exchanges have had difficulties with banks, right? Just getting a normal bank account is not easy for them. And that was certainly the case with Bitfinex, which is the parent company that created Tether. So that kind of necessitated them using sort of lesser known banks or shadier banks, if you would. But also the reality is that Tether allows some people in certain jurisdictions to bypass regulations, either anti-money laundering regulations or capital control regulations. Like, there are many countries that don't allow you to buy more than X amount of dollars per month or whatever. And Tether was a convenient way of trying to get around that. So I would say there's definitely, shadiness or potential shadiness around stablecoins. Yes. Now, the problem was, for me, what I saw as the biggest potential problem with Tether was, are they printing them out of thin air? Right? Because if so, then that would obviously be a very powerful tool to manipulate the market. And
Sure.
and they claim, no, we're fully backed by dollars. And then back in 2018, there was some instance where some bank closed Bitfinex's account and they seized some of their assets. And so they had a huge, I don't remember how many $1 million gap. And apparently Tether extended a loan to them. And so at that point, it was made public that they were not fully backed. And all of this sort of create a kerfuffle. They wound up being sued by the New York, I don't remember if it was the Attorney General, but
I think it was the Attorney General.
Right?
Yeah.
So they were sued for trying to cover up that that loan. And recently the lawsuit was settled with Tether admitting no wrongdoing, paying a 18, I think, and a half $1 million fine, and then committing to these transparency reports where they would be more less opaque about their reserves. So they just published their first, reserve report, and it showed that they had, I think, 75% of the reserves in cash and cash equivalents. But when you drill down to it, like 3% was actually another, I don't remember off the top of my head, maybe 3 or 4% was like, treasury bills, which you could validly count as cash. And a lot of the rest was, commercial paper or basically loans or, stuff that has credit risk attached to it, which was really stupid. I mean, and unnecessary. Like somebody, I think it was Greg Foss, said something to like, your bank is probably in worse shape, but still, this is not good. They should have just kept the cash in the bank and to not exacerbate the already controversial nature of their operation.
Sure. Well, I mean, I do think you brought up a really good point of why Tether is necessary for people in order to buy Bitcoin. Because even with our brokerage, that we have Bitcoin Reserve, it's dealing with U.S. clients is not easy. And, it's the land of the free, but they have so many regulations around, just working with U.S. client, U.S. citizens, dealing in U.S. dollars. So I can absolutely see why there's a very real demand for people to want to use something equivalent to a US dollar in order to buy crypto with it. And you also brought up a really good point with the traders. If you're a trader, you don't want to just lock your profits in your checking account because that's extremely inefficient. You want to use something like Tether or USDC, a stable coin that you can lock your profits in, but you don't have to wait 3 or 4 business days in order to have those actually in your possession. So
Exactly.
I think those are fantastic points.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's happening is that people are realizing, all right, Tether is not fully backed. And I think we saw that somebody posted a screenshot of Tether breaking parity and now trading for, I think, 80 something cents to the dollar, which means somebody's saying, all right, Tether is riskier than actual US dollars, so we'll take it at a discount. And one important point, I think there's three important takeaways from the whole Tether thing. The first is to understand that, yes, Tether is not fully backed, and there is some risk, credit risk specifically, and or management risk associated with Tether. So if you thought it was sort of as good as dollars, it turns out that no, not so much.
Yeah.
And now that, but that's public now. I think there's now, there won't be the excuse of, in the future, if there's a problem with Tether, oh my God, who could have known? It's like, yeah,
Now
well,
we know.
now we all know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's several other stable coins now, some of them very, like very regulated, very buttoned down type of things. And Tether is still the biggest, but people have alternatives if they don't like Tether. And there was a really good thread by Caitlin Long, who's phenomenal, by the way. And she was explaining how the way they're going to do things in Wyoming with the new legislation is that when they issue a stable coin, they will be forced to keep 100% reserves on the bank. Like, they will legally be forced to do that. There won't be any way to treat reserves as if they were an investment. So options for like solidly backed stable coins are coming. And one of the things that Greg Foss, who, by the way, like if you guys haven't listened to Greg Foss, like go out and do that now, because, for example, I use, as an investor, I was always into stocks. Like, for me, bonds were what my grandpa invested in, and I never really paid much attention to them.
Right.
But Greg Foss comes from bonds, and so he has a fascinating perspective on Bitcoin. And one of the things he said with this whole Tether thing was like, look, Tether risk is basically fiat risk. Like, if Tether starts having problems, it's because fiat is having problems, and the only insurance against fiat is Bitcoin. So the same conditions that would make Tether, be riskier are the same conditions that would make Bitcoin be more attractive.
Yeah, that's very true.
So
very true.
So he's not too concerned.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin, you hear the term trustless technology, and that is a huge difference between Bitcoin and Tether and, all the other shit coins out there. Is Bitcoin, you don't need to have trust because you can verify the actual network yourself. You can just run it, you can buy a little computer, run a node, and have, verify that Bitcoin is legitimate, verify that there are still only 21 million. And you can't really do that with Tether or any other stable coin or any other really crypto. You have to trust in typically a single entity that they're going to do the right thing. So yeah, I think you bring up some really good points. Okay, so I think we kind of debunked the energy FUD. I think the Tether FUD is good on. Is there anything else you feel like you want to mention about the Tether FUD before we go into like how, your business, how people can get in contact with you?
No, not about the Tether thing in particular. Just, coming to the price dip for a second, because I did get some calls from people who are not my clients, but know I'm in the space, and they're like, "Oh my God, so should I sell?" and I understand, right? It's hard, and if this is your first cycle, like I feel for you, because it's not fun.
No.
But this is where you have to appreciate that, like, if you're scared right now, you need to study, right? You really need to put in sort of the work to understand why some of us aren't scared. because nothing has changed about Bitcoin's fundamental proposition to suggest that it's not, its value has not diminished even if its price has gone down, right? So should I sell? Well, let me see. Is the Fed still printing money like crazy? Yes.
Yep.
No. Okay. Are prices running rampant? Yes. Okay. Um, are the world's supply logistics kind of screwed up? And does it seem like it's going to be a challenging next few months? Yes. Okay. Are governments flexing their dictatorial muscles? Yes. Yeah. I wouldn't sell Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean,
I would buy
how
the
on?
dip.
Yeah, buy the dip. Yeah, I agree. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you have all these factors right now, and I think it's just I don't think this bull run is over by any means.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah, I think it's
I
going to
mean,
surprise a lot of people what happens. I don't think people really know what's coming. Of course, I could be wrong, and you could be wrong,
of
and
course,
we're
yeah,
humans. But
yeah, but I completely agree with you. I think there's like one company, and it's one of the things I've loved about being following the space closely since 2017 is sort of some of the new faces and new voices, right? And so, for example, when I see what Jack Mallers is doing with Lightning Strike, oh my god, you know and he had a thread where he destroyed Elon Musk with reason,
yeah,
because here's this young man who is uh you know reshaping the landscape of you know financial transmission of value around the world, right? And he's kicking ass at it while Elon is masturbating to Dogecoin.
yep,
And so he has every right to chew him out. And so Jack Maller's tremendous. New York Dig, for God's sakes, I mean, the work they're doing, bringing on the insurance companies and the banks and whatnots, I could hardly be more impressed. And in their newsletter they say, we haven't seen yet, some people sold, some people bought. Overall, we were still net buyers, but interest has not, like, nobody has changed their mind in terms of the banks and like the big companies that are deciding to get into the space. They had not been scared off 2 days ago, and we will see if that changes, because one thing that is that not all institutions are equal, right? Some are coming in with a lot of conviction, some are not, and that's, I think, to be expected. But I do see real forward motion in terms of Bitcoin becoming increasingly entrenched in finance and sort of baked into the financial infrastructure of the world. And I mean, I'm still super bullish.
yeah, yeah. Me too. I think I mean, it's 12 years old. It's a seriously groundbreaking technology that's going to replace much of how planet Earth functions. And if you have something that's that big of a deal that can replace gold, bonds, you know, many aspects of stocks, real estate being inflated, it's going to replace that sector. So many addressable markets that this
Yeah.
thing can just totally render obsolete. And it's how could you not expect there to be just a ton of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about it if it's that big of a deal? So,
Exactly. It's like you remember I mentioned earlier that I talk to my clients about electricity, and I bring it up in this context. Like right now, yeah, you don't know if you have AC or DC in your house, but back in the day when Tesla and Edison were sort of duking it out to see which format would be the one, if you wanted to put electricity in your house, you need to dive into the details and figure out if you wanted DC or AC and what the trade-offs were, and the pros and cons of each, etc. And that's where we're at with Bitcoin.
yeah,
Like my grandkids, are going to use some sort of money that's going to be based on Bitcoin, and they're not going to have to think about it. Like, I'm going to be out of a job in a decade or less because Bitcoin's just going to be money, and that's going to be or the base layer or whatever. But you won't have to think about it anymore. It'll just be there.
Yeah, and
But
you
right
and
now, yeah.
well, yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, I totally agree. You have, companies like Square releasing reports saying that they believe, the same thing you believe, that, and they said, we believe Bitcoin will become more ubiquitous in the future. So it's not just a bunch of people who, want to buy Bitcoin like us, and no, it's huge companies that are saying the same exact thing.
Right. And what I explain to my clients is, here's the thing: I can't trust Bitcoin for you. You need to put in the work, because I can tell you it's awesome and I can tell you to buy, and maybe you listen, maybe you won't. But if you don't develop that conviction within yourself, um,
You're gonna have weak
it'll
hands.
be pointless. Yeah, you'll have weak hands. So which is exactly what you should try to avoid, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, so how can people get a hold of you if they want to start using your consulting services for Bitcoin and learn more about it? How can they get a hold of you?
Thank you. Well, I'm on Twitter as at the BTC Coach, and people can reach me via email at hello at the btc.coach. So either of those works. And of course,
Awesome.
my website is thebitcoin.coach.
Excellent. And yeah, I should also say he has a great newsletter that kind of just summarizes all of the major Bitcoin events that have happened in the last week. It's probably a 10-minute read each time, really concise, good information. It's probably my favorite newsletter to share with people who are, getting started with Bitcoin, because it's so digestible. It's really good information. So check that out too. And Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time. I thought it was a good conversation. I thought we debunked some crazy pieces of FUD, and I hope to see you again.
Andrew, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay. All right. Cheers.
Take care. Bye bye.